well, we just aren't sure.
I mean, I'd
probably be in that 23%, to be honest.
Yeah, that's where I land is not sure, apathetic maybe. I feel like to solve the problems with TikTok, we should just solve the problems with app privacy in general and stop letting people collect so much data about us. So.
I think you bring up a good point, Will, that if we took out TikTok and replaced it with China, and I said 59% of U.S. adults surveyed see China as a major threat to national security, I wouldn't blink an eye. That probably sounds about right. I don't have that number, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was pretty close. And I think people see TikTok as China. I think that's unfair to TikTok. I think TikTok has more of a firewall between itself and the Chinese government than most Chinese companies. And I think there's a lot of Chinese companies like Lenovo that people give a pass to just because they're more familiar with them or they use them more, which is why it's interesting to see that the older you get, the more likely you are to think it's a national security threat.
Well, and you don't talk about Lenovo like, I'm on Lenovo social network app all day, every day,
No, but you're on a Lenovo all day, every day.
Yeah.
Right. But people
you're running everything.
There's a social network conversation about like, oh, they know too much, and then it's like, what about that monitor?
Like, all of our routers are made in China. If we're worried about TikTok, we should be worried about that and those pipelines. I think more so.
All that said, I think I might have responded that this is a security threat. I don't know if I'd say major because it's a broad question. Should someone who works in a sensitive position in the U.S. military, the U.S. government, or U.S. intelligence have TikTok on their phone? No. But that's not because I think that TikTok is handing over things to the Chinese military directly. It's because that's a lot of data to be handing over to anyone. And you're a high-value target. You shouldn't be doing that. And there's not a great way to prevent TikTok from collecting the data that it collects. And it's been caught collecting some data that it wasn't entirely above board. But that goes back to what you said earlier, Will. That's not unusual. Threads collects a lot of data. That's been in the news lately. But then when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's also the same data that Facebook collects, that Twitter collects, that all these other apps collect. So it does come down to these apps do collect a lot of information about you. And if you're a sensitive target, you probably shouldn't be using those because you shouldn't let anybody have them just to be safe. For the average person like myself, I don't think TikTok is a big national security threat.
No, like if you're not in a position to evaluate what a national security threat is, like I am, I'm not in that position. I'm an ex-journalist who makes video games, right? Like, we're probably okay. The counter to this is the Russian operative in Ukraine who was responsible for some bombings in civilian areas, who was posting his daily runs on a running app and got assassinated by the Ukrainians as a result because they knew his route.
They believed that it was a Strava route that led him to it. Yeah.
Like, maybe it's like there have to be rules about this kind of stuff and how we use our devices.
I mean, even that is more of like, I was posting my location. Think about that.
Right.
TikTok is not really, this is a whole other thing. It may be data collection that, will come back to bite me. But I still consume things on TikTok. And I don't really ever think like, I mean, what a landscape to get data that will hurt civilians later. But I also don't know. So I'm kind of in that camp of like, I don't feel personally all that scared day to day. But I think we all have the opportunity to, share or not share on various platforms.
Yeah, I think there's more of a threat to your personal information from private companies than there is from governments in this particular instance. I'd be more worried about TikTok having my information than the Chinese government. What I'm saying. Thankfully, operating systems have been making it easier and easier for you to take control over what data that apps can collect. Android is an operating system that does that, and now there's a podcast entirely devoted to talking to you about Android. Android aficionados Ron Richards and Huan Tui Dao bring you Android Faithful,
Yay!
Premiering today, as we're recording this, Tuesday, July 11th. If you're hearing this before 8 p.m. Eastern Time, go to twitch.tv/gooddayinternet at 8 p.m. And you can watch them, record the first episode. Everybody should go subscribe right now at www.androidfaithful.com. Big congratulations to Ron and Len and everybody, Vishal and all the folks who are helping out. And welcome to all the Android Faithful patrons who are showing up in our Discord. It's good to have you. With prices for PC components like GPUs and CPUs and memory starting to finally come down, you may want to upgrade your PC. So we thought we'd check in with Will about where to start. Will, you built a lot of PCs in your day. How do you determine what parts of your system you're going to upgrade?
Well, Tom, I start by thinking about how I use the computer, right? So if I play a lot of games, then a video card is often the place you can start. And you think about the life cycle of a PC, you build a new PC or buy a new PC. And then when things start to get slow, you look at the components you can upgrade. So if the frames are slow in the latest games, video card's a good place to do. If you do a lot of like heavy computing work, if you're compiling stuff, if you're a programmer, or if you're doing graphic design work, then it gets more complicated these days because there's kind of a, even your photo editing app is going to use GPU at this point. So you kind of have to make some more intelligent decisions. And with that, I really don't start to upgrade these days until things start to feel slow. So sometimes it's as easy as taking a 16 gig system with 16 gigs of RAM, putting an extra 2 sticks of RAM and moving it to 32 gigs, and all of a sudden you're in a whole new world of performance.
What about Windows 11? Is Windows 11 compatibility for your parts something that's worth paying attention to? Is that a good guide?
So anything you buy today is going to have Windows 11 compatibility. Unless you're going to eBay and buying old hardware from 10 years ago. Your new components, anything you've bought realistically the last 3 or 4 years is going to be Windows 11 compatible. And then there's a larger question about whether you want to upgrade to Windows 11. Like, would I build a new machine today to have a Windows 11? Would I replace a perfectly good Windows 10 machine just to get Windows 11? Probably not. Windows 11 is great. I'm using it day to day. It's a much better OS now than it was when it launched. Is it a necessity? Absolutely.
That's good to know. I think that's comforting for a lot of people who are feeling the pressure. What about upgrading to older stuff? So you've got several generations out of the current CPU or a GPU that's like 800 level NVIDIA, something like that. Should you go to the previous models and get a lower price?
So this is where it gets tricky. With CPUs, you can often buy it one generation back or like a half-step generation back and get a pretty good deal, especially as the transition's happening. With this last generation, we changed memory specs. So, if you're buying a new board and a brand new CPU now, you're probably going to buy which is substantially more expensive. And realistically, probably have a shorter lifespan than the DDR4 that you buy now, just because it's a new technology and new process, and it probably won't last as long. It'll also be, when you need to replace it, it'll also be a lot cheaper than it is right now. With GPUs, it's more complicated. The newer GPUs on the AMD side, you can absolutely go back a generation. You don't have to buy a 7600, a Radeon 7600 today. If you're playing at 1080p, that's a great card. You can save a fair amount of money by going one generation back and buying a 6700 XT. Very comparable performance and like $100 cheaper. On the NVIDIA side, it's more complicated because they rolled out some new technology with the 4000 series cards. Now, reviewers really don't like the 4060 because it's a pretty minimal upgrade in most ways from the previous generation 6 series card, the 3060. Mm-hmm. The place that it's better is it has DLSS 3, which is a new generation of DLSS. For games that support it, it can actually generate frames to reduce microstuttering in your games. So you can see like anywhere from a 30 to an 80% performance boost in some games, depending on where the bottlenecks are in them. The games require support, but it's a relatively easy plugin for developers to add. So games that are still being actively updated, like Witcher 3, which is a pretty old game at this point, got a DLSS 3 patch that had an enormous performance boost. Again, for people playing with everything turned up at 1080p. I think the ray tracing support is also a little bit better on the NVIDIA side, and the new 4000 series cards are much more power efficient than the 3000 series cards. You're paying a pretty high premium for that, and I think you'll see a pretty good. It's hard to go wrong at the like $800 to $1,000 PC space right now because everything's pretty good. The DLSS 3 stuff is it's a reason to go with an NVIDIA card, frankly, right now. I think.
And then the final question. Okay, I figured out what I'm going to buy. How do I shop? Where do you go?
Yeah, so I usually establish my budget. I say, okay, I want to spend $1,000. I want to spend $1,500. Yeah, I did this with my daughter last year, and we spent $500 on that and got a really nice PC. A little bit stuff scrounged from the old PC, but mostly new hardware. And then I go to PCPartPicker.com. They do a ton of guides. It's a part editorial, part you can post your builds. They do basically put in what CPU and what GPU you want, and then you can pull motherboards and things like that from there. They also will tend to keep you out of trouble, so you can start with their guides, you can build out from there. You can also just start from scratch and pick the hardware you want. It'll tell you if your CPU isn't going to work with your motherboard, or if you have the right RAM for your motherboard, or if your power supply isn't powerful enough for the hardware that you're putting in the machine, which is super important, especially if you're not super confident in those choices, because like especially with DDR4 and DDR5 in the channel right now, multiple different chipsets from AMD and Intel, 3 different graphics card vendors because Intel's back into it again. It gets really complicated really fast, and it's nice to have either start with one of their guides at the price point you want, or the kind of like use case you want, or just build up from scratch, and then you can send a link to your friend and say, hey, I know you're good at building PCs. Is this the right thing for me?
Now, for that person whose dog was barking in the back seat, or just had a semi honk at them, and you're like, "What was that? What was that website?" It was PCPartPicker.com.